Hey everyone, welcome back to the Saltwater Edge YouTube channel. Today, Tyler and I are talking about big rubbers, how to rig them, and maybe some fishing techniques. I'm sure Tyler will drop a lot of knowledge on us in particular. But yeah, how to rig them, different ways to rig them, different ways to fish them. Tyler, why don't you lead us off?
I can lead us off. I'm going to be focusing on like the snake or eel style plastics. You'll find most of them are in like the 12 to 14 inch range. Bunch of good ones out there nowadays. Probably the most popular one, at least right now, is the GT eel. These are just a couple that I have laying around in Barbie, but he's got all sorts of good colors that all catch fish. A little hard to get your hands on them right now, but if you can, they're great. They work great. All of these work, but the GT eel is sort of the pinnacle of the big eel plastic right now. And then we'll jump into the Hoagies. This is the Hoagie Original 14 inch, sort of a limited run of them out right now. They're probably going to go pretty quick, so I would get your hands on them now if you want them. And then these are the Hoagie Slappys. This is what Hoagie came out with to sort of replace the original. The difference is you can sort of see it there. The original is much softer plastic. It's got an inch more in length. Sort of just has a better wiggle. I prefer them, but these ones are a little more hardy, more durable, still work great, still catch a ton of fish. And then the JoeBaggs is sort of just somewhere in between. Really big profile, same sort of thing, just big profile to drop on bottom for big bass. This is my box. You'll see it's a little different, but all sort of the same stuff. This is my good friend Danny Savage up in Boston, Personal Best Baits. He doesn't do wholesale or anything like that, but you could reach out to him on Instagram if you're interested. He does a great job, makes really good baits. He only does a few colors, but he makes them really well. This is his PB&J. This is his pink. And then he does green, blue, white, and I think that's about it. But they swim great on jig heads, on Titan divers. And we'll get into rigging probably in a minute.
Not a wide selection, but some sluggos in a couple different sizes, the 9 inch and the 12. I've got the bigger Albie snack and the 9 inch JigPro Y-tail. A bunch of different ways to rig them, which, like Tyler said, we'll get into rigging in a sec, but I mainly fish sluggos from a boat. I know guys will fish them all sorts of different ways. I'm lucky enough to know some very fishy people who like to fish them from shore too, so I've learned a bit from them about that side as well. But I've been fishing sluggos from boat for a very long time, and I've sort of come across a bunch of different cool ways to rig them that all fish very well and all sort of shine in different situations. Yeah, so let's get into rigging. I'll go quick on the Albie snack. So the bigger Albie snack, pretty simple. I only rig it one way on a 6-aught. What do they call them? They've got the Albie snack hook in a bunch of different sizes. I use the 6-aught for these. I find that if I go too light on the hook, they surface too much. One of my big pet peeves on big soft plastics is when you're fishing them, if they sort of nose up to the surface. I hate that. So I'm using a 6-aught hook with this, which is this guy right here. They've got, usually, I had to take this one, but they usually have the screw lock there, so it screws right into the nose. Hook comes through like that. And then with these, I really only fish them one way, and I'm pointing the rod tip at them, twitching it down to the side, and getting it to sort of zig pretty erratically just below the surface. These are great when there's big sand eels around, mullet around. They're really good when there's mullet around.
Squid.
Herring, squid. Yeah, you could put a jig head on them and sort of bounce them along, but there's not a ton of like floppy action to them. Yeah, I prefer to fish them fast near the surface.
Yeah, I can run through these pretty quick. These are pretty simple. I'm pretty much either weightless, Titan rider. That's just situational. If you got fish up on the surface, fish it weightless. If you're fishing really shallow water, fish it weightless. And generally at night, at least, you're going real slow, painfully slow on the reel, with just a subtle little twitch every 2 or 3 cranks. And then you can burn them too, but usually that slow and steady kind of gets it done. And then the other way is with the Titan Diver, which is the same hook, just with the weight on the belly. These are awesome. We got a whole bunch of different weights now, and they're interchangeable. I grabbed the one that I pinched down, so I can't change that one out. But usually, there we go. You just slide the weight out if you want to change it. Bang. Put the new one in. Bang. And that way, when you're out on the water, you're not ripping up your plastics, changing them from jig head to jig head or anything like that. You just change the weight like that instead of changing it from hook to hook. So just saves your plastic a little bit. And before I forget, talking about saving plastics, the Fix-A-Lure stuff, there's a couple different brands, but this one in particular works really, really well. Save you a ton of money on your big plastics, because that's just the nature of the big plastic, is they get ripped up. So that helps save them. And then the last way is just simple jig head. The JoeBaggs SVGs are by far my favorite. The Jeks are another good one. But you just want something with a big, stout, meaty hook that's not going to bend down on you on a big fish.
Back to me. I'll start with the fix-it stuff too. If you're in a pinch, you can heat something up on like with a flame and sort of melt it back. That works too if you're in a pinch, but this stuff definitely easier. I do see Tyler using that a lot, and it does hold up pretty well.
Every day.
Sluggo-wise, my favorite way to rig them, especially when I'm boat fishing, is just like this. Hoagie, I want to say maybe 4 years ago, made a hook similar to this. It had the screw lock coming off the back of the shank like that, and then they had 2 beads there to keep this from sliding. This is a pretty big barb on this hook, but if the barb's small, this has a chance to pop over the barb and slide off. So now I don't think you can buy them anywhere anymore, so you can make your own pretty easily. This is what hook is this? The Gamakatsu live bait in an 8/0, the standard size. The heavy size of this hook is just too thick I want this to be free moving, and the shank of the heavy one is just too wide, so it gets kind of bound up there. The barb's big enough, so I'm not going to put any sort of bead or little rubber stopper there. I'm happy with it, but you get a ton of movement. The weight up here keeps it from nosing up to the surface, and you don't miss, surprisingly, you don't miss a lot of fish. Sometimes, like if I'm fishing them this way, it feels like I get tugged on the tail, and so you'd think you'd miss a lot more rigging it this way. You really don't. Easy to unhook. You can fish them faster too, like this. The action is a little different, so if I'm fishing like a hot afternoon, I will switch to rigging them this way. This is the 10/0 Titan Rider. I put this hook on the 12-inch, which is this, and the 9-inch, which is this one. Again, weight-wise, keep them from nosing up as much. But rigging them this way, you can do a slower presentation with a sharp twitch, and it gets it to sort of glide one way randomly, glide another way randomly, and it really looks like some sort of dying bait that they will commit to when they don't want to move as fast. So that's the 2 different weightless ways. Then you can rig them, like Tyler said, with the Titan Diver. This is, again, a 10/0. You could probably use a 12/0, but I've been happy with the 10/0s. I don't change the weights much myself, so I do just take my pliers and pinch them down to keep them on there. Weightless, or with the weight, if I'm fishing like faster moving water, this keeps it down. I can fish it faster. You still get a little bit of that glide motion. The 12-inch really shines, especially from boat for me, when they won't commit to the dock, or I'm just tired of dealing with 2 trebles on the dock. The nice thing about soft plastics is they're all just one hook, sort of like a bucktail, so they're pretty easy to unhook until you get into the dual rigged with sluggos. You can rig these by yourself. I believe we have an old video that Steve McKenna did on rigging tandem sluggos. Very good video, very good fisherman, obviously, has a lot of tips, very worth the watch if you do want to rig your own. So I won't get into that too much. But they also sell them pre-rigged. You can put zip ties on them like that. It keeps it, just lasts its life a little bit longer, keeps the hooks from ripping out completely, just putting zip ties there. I just cut them flush. If you think the sharpness, if they spin or something, and you think the sharpness of that is cutting them, you can melt them with a lighter and just smooth the whole thing out. And from a boat, I'm usually not fishing them tandem rigged, almost never. From shore, though, I've been learning that tandem rigged is probably the way to go. You get a few more fish penned that way. And then with the JigPros, a little bit different. They're on jig heads. I don't usually fish sluggos on jig heads. It's just not the action I want with them. But if I do want to fish a big soft plastic on a jig head, the JigPro is just the easiest thing to rig, and they fish very well. They hold up really well. And whereas I use zip ties on these, I almost never use zip ties or glue on the JigPro. They just hold on that head really well. And I like it really depends where you're fishing weight-wise, but they make a 5-inch, a 7-inch, and a 9-inch hook. And the collar is the same on each of those sizes. So there's a pre-made hole. Say if you get the 9-inch, which is this one, you want the 9-inch hook because the length of the hook will match up with the pre-made hole in the top. However, if you don't like the gauge wire of the hook, you can downsize to a 7-inch or even a 5-inch, which is a smaller gauge wire. It's still not going to bend out. These hooks are very beefy, but you can put a 5-inch jig head in the 9-inch bait because the collar is the same size. You just have to make your own top hole. And you get a little bit more variety in the 5-inch sizes if you want to go really light. Situationally, with these different riggings in particular, this one I'm using probably most of the time. The only time I wouldn't use this when I'm on a boat is if it's like a sunny afternoon and I think the fish want something that's more lazy and slow. Otherwise, I'm usually going to start with this. It casts pretty well. You miss very few fish. You can fish it slow and sort of let it sink down, twitch it, let it sink down, twitch it. You can also fish it very fast. You can sort of burn it almost like an Albie snack with your rod tip down, twitching it. You get a ton of movement from the whole body because there's no hook taking up a third of it, keeping it more rigid. You just get a ton of movement, and you can make this thing look pretty sweet. Burning this through boulder fields especially, casting into whitewater from the boat, trying to pull fish off of reefs. Very good fast presentation. And again, you really don't get tail tugged on this many times. The hookup ratio is surprisingly very good with the hookup there. This one is definitely the slower, lazy retrieve. I use the same size hook in the 9-inch and the 12-inch. It keeps that nose from coming up too often. But this one, I'll do a really sharp twitch. Again, this is all primarily from boat. I hate to fish these this way from shore because you're usually using a bigger rod, and I hate to sidearm a big rod. So all these techniques here are going to be, I'm talking about a boat. But again, sharp twitches, rod down to the side, sort of letting it pause and do its glide, almost like you'd let a spook finish its glide before I twitch it again and get it to go a different direction. It's a really productive way of fishing them when it's hot and sunny. There's fish around sitting on the rocks. It's a really good way to get them to sort of just come up and eat it. Is that lazy, slow method. I'm switching to the Titan diver if there's heavier current and I want to fish it sort of like I was just describing this, a little bit faster, but I want it to stay below the surface. Same exact hook, just a Titan diver version. It's a 10-aught hook. And then I can also let this sort of drop and fish it like a roller coaster, kind of let it dive down, twitch it up, let it drop down, twitch it up. And that's usually faster current situations from boat, or if I want to fish just closer to the bottom, deeper water, the fish are sort of staying deep. What else? And then the Tandem is something that's been growing on me from shore. Lucky enough to talk with and fish with some very fishy people, and they've sort of been enlightening me into the Tandem rig, which I usually didn't opt for too often, but it's definitely growing on me, and I'm learning how to fish those different ways. You can rig them yourself. You can buy the pre-rigged. A lot of that may depend on what gap you want in your hook. This is the pre-rigged Slug-Go. If you want maybe a larger gap, you'd have to rig them yourself. Or if you wanted, heavier hooks to get them a little deeper or something, you could rig them yourself. There's a handful of different hook options out there. One tip I did get from a friend rigging these is some hooks have flat sides and some have round sides. The flat sides have a tendency to just rip through the plastic quicker, whereas the round ones increase that longevity a little. And then zip ties, there's not a great zip tie method for the weightless. It's just not a good way to do it, but you can zip tie these pretty easily. Just like that, that's a cleaner one. And that again, just increases the longevity of the hooks ripping out there.
Yeah, and I'll jump into my sort of side of it. I fish probably 90-95% from a kayak. I'd say these big snake or eel styles are probably most effective from a kayak or a boat. There seems to be more and more surf guys getting into it and catching fish with them. I think the biggest sort of hurdle there is just they don't cast that great. They're really not horrible to cast. I'd compare them sort of like a big metal lip or something. They're just floppy. They don't cast well into the wind, that's for sure. But you have the right night with fish right in front of you, I would give them a shot. But I wanted to just sort of touch on, because you said the roller coaster thing with the Titan divers. So both with jig head and Titan diver, I'm almost always trying to keep this thing just painting the bottom. And the whole time I'm fishing them, I'm sort of imagining in my head this thing just coasting along. And then when you pause is when they hit it most of the time. So it raises when you reel it, obviously, and then as you let it settle back down the bottom, I don't flip the bail. I keep the bail closed. I just sort of lean into it, let it settle back down on the bottom, feel it tick bottom, pick it back up, and probably at least 50% of the time they hit it when you don't even have your hand on the handle. They'll hit it on the drop. Not always, but there's a lot of nights that's sort of the ticket. And then as far as the difference between the jig heads and the Titan divers, that's sort of, I don't have like a real rule in my head that I go with. It's sort of just a feel thing. That's sort of a big deal with all these big soft plastics, is just feel. If it's really windy and there's a lot of current and you can't feel well, you're not going to catch fish. So in those situations, if it's windy, if there's high current, or definitely if there's both, I'm using a jig head just because I don't know if it's a more direct, because the line goes straight to the head there or what it is, but you can just really feel it tick bottom better. And then on calm nights, I'm throwing the Titan divers for the most part. And then there's some nights where there's really no rhyme or reason to it, at least not that I know of. But sometimes, for example, I'll get lots of short strikes on the Titan diver, switch to a jig head, start catching fish, and vice versa. It works both ways. And again, don't really know why that is, but fish are weird, and sometimes you just have to change it up very slightly to get those fish to commit. So
yeah, that's my run through of my side of big soft plastics. Tyler, anything to add?
One thing to note that I thought of while you were going through that is I don't know what you'd call them as far as style, but those baits are sort of, you have to work them yourself with the rod. These, I would say, you're not really doing too much. I think people try to do too much when they fish the big snakes and eels. You're really just letting the tail of that big plastic do the work for you. You don't, like little subtle twitches is all you need. You don't need to rip it around. You don't need to do too much with it. So that's sort of one last note to end on for me.
And I guess, yeah, one more tip actually. I know I mentioned sort of swapping this and the dock interchangeably, and fishing this slow, getting it to do that glide can get fish that don't want to move as fast to commit. But a really fun way to fish these two is just with a rod tip down, fast retrieve, kind of burning them through the boulder field or the whitewater from a boat. You can get some pretty sweet strikes fishing it that way as well. But yeah, soft plastics, a lot of benefits. This single hook is a massive one. It just makes everything easier, and usually if they're pinned on it, they're gonna stay pinned usually.
Something about them too just gets those big fish to go. I mean, I fished them this year. I barely ever fished live eels. There's plenty of nights where you can be fishing next to somebody with live eels and you'll outfish them with plastic. Not always the case, but it holds true sometimes. So definitely something to have, even if you are an eel guy. Maybe try mixing them in. I tend to pull bigger fish with the plastic on nights where the eel's catching, say, high 30-inch fish to low 40-inch fish. The big plastic will pull those mid or high 40-inch fish. So worth mixing them into your arsenal.
And I've had good luck as well. I didn't put it in my lineup here just because I forgot. But I've had very good luck fishing the JoeBaggs 14.5-inch on a Titan diver, this weighted hook, in place of a rigged eel. The action is a little more loose, like Tyler was saying, than the Slug-Go. So if I want to throw something that mimics how you'd fish a rigged eel, I have had success with that larger JoeBaggs on the Titan diver as well. Very, very good luck. One thing I did forget to mention from boat is weightless, rigged this way. It's not the most exciting way to fish them, but they can be very effective trolled. I used to fish a lot from a rowboat at night, and between just changing spots, I just troll a weightless Slug-Go during the daytime or nighttime. Sort of like guys, I mean, I guess especially like trolling something like that, sort of looks like a tube.
Yeah.
But just trolling that straight, no action at all, I'm pretty sure a Slug-Go just tracks straight through the water. But trolling them can be very, very good as well, rigged this way. You could troll a tandem rig too, but I'm usually rigging them like this. Yeah, that's all we got for you today. Thanks for tuning in. Put any comments you have or questions down in the comments below. Yeah, we'll see you in the next one.